Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. When you hear the term LMIA, what do you think of? Recently, you might think of news that they're going to be restricted. You might think of foreign workers coming into the country by the millions, working jobs that should be for Canadians. There's partial truth to some of those things, but today we're going to discuss about what an LMIA actually is and these recent changes that you may have heard about in the news. So first, what is an LMIA? Let's start with the acronym. LMIA means Labor Market Impact Assessment. What does that mean? This means that the Employment Department of Canada, ESDC, takes an application from an employer, a Canadian employer, and assesses whether hiring a foreign worker will positively or negatively affect the Canadian labor market if that foreign worker is hired. The purpose of an LMIA is to support the Canadian economy and likewise Canadian employers who need to fill a position at their company. But this has always been an exceptional measure. It's not that you have a foreign worker, maybe who's working for you while they're studying or while they're on a post-grad work permit, and you like the way they work, you want to keep them at your company permanently, you can apply for the LMIA. That's half true. So I don't know how many times I've had consultations with Canadian employers and also foreign workers who want to work together long-term in the future, but they don't really understand that it's not as simple as saying, oh, I like this foreign worker, I want to keep them permanently. There's more to it than that. So, as you may know, for LMIAs, a position that is needed for a Canadian company needs to be advertised. Why does it need to be advertised if you already have someone in mind you want to keep working for you? The purpose is to find Canadian or permanent resident workers first. They have to take priority. And if the Canadian employer does find a suitable Canadian citizen or permanent resident worker for the position that's needed at their company, they do need to consider hiring them, and actually in this case the LMIA is working as it's supposed to be working. But LMIAs are, and always have been, considered to be exceptional. They're for exceptional circumstances. This means that it should be the last resort, the last option for a Canadian employer looking to fill a position at their company. That's why it confuses some employers nowadays if we have a consultation and they ask, okay, what's the process? And they say, why do we have to advertise? I already know this worker right here. It's because it's an exception. You need to keep looking for Canadian workers first. Now, who processes LMIAs? This is done by the Employment Department, also known as Service Canada. So it's important to note this isn't an immigration application directly. It's actually assessed by Service Canada. However, where IRCC, the Immigration Department, comes into play is after the LMIA is approved. Then the foreign worker can use the LMIA approval letter to apply for a work permit or to support their permanent residency application, or both. So in this way, ESDC and IRCC kind of work together in what's called the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, the TFWP. So now that we have a little bit of a background for LMIAs, what are these recent changes? Well, I can read these off right here. As of September 26th this year, so from today's date, about 1 month from now. First point, low-wage positions in metropolitan areas with unemployment rates of 6% or higher will not be processed for LMIAs. What does this mean? Well, low wage is the key point here. There are different types of LMIAs. There are high-wage LMIAs, there are low-wage LMIAs, there are LMIAs to support PR, There are ones for agriculture work, and there are a few others. For low-wage LMIAs, if the unemployment rate is 6% or higher in metropolitan areas, the LMIA will not be accepted and will not be processed, period. Second point, related to the first, again, low-wage LMIAs. For low-wage positions, the current 20% cap on positions at a company will be reduced to 10%. This is actually what it used to be in the past. So what is this 10%, 20% cap? This is the total number of employees at the company. If a company, for example, has 20 employees, a 10% cap means only 2 employees can be foreign workers under the low-wage LMIA stream. And the third point, which also affects low-wage LMIAs, is that the maximum duration of a work permit for this type of LMIA position will be reduced from 2 years down to 1 year. This sort of emphasizes how LMIA-supported work permits are supposed to be temporary. A Canadian employer should be looking for Canadian citizen and permanent resident workers. And if they do hire a foreign worker on an LMIA-based work permit, this is supposed to be temporary until they can find a permanent worker. So this reduction from a 2-year work permit to a 1-year work permit definitely underlines the temporary nature of this type of work permit. So these are 3 changes that are coming to low-wage positions starting September 26th. So now you might be asking, what's the difference between high wage and low wage and other types of LMIA applications? The actual difference comes down to a specific dollar amount per hour, which depends on the median wage in each province. So as an example, in British Columbia and BC, the high wage, low wage cutoff is $28.85 per hour as of April 2024. That means if you have a company offering an LMIA to a foreign worker and it's under the low wage stream, their hourly wage is less than $28.85 per hour. If it's more than that, it would be part of the high wage stream, which these changes coming up do not apply to, because it's assumed that a high salary should equal a high-skilled, highly specialized, in-demand type of position, whereby a Canadian citizen or permanent resident genuinely may not be found by an employer looking to fill their position. But that lets me transition into the next point. Low wage doesn't equal low skill. When you think of a low wage position in Canada, you might automatically think, okay, low wage, you might think cashier, you might think agricultural worker, you might think of someone working at a restaurant as a server or working as a dishwasher in the back. Not necessarily. As I mentioned, the median wage, low wage, high wage cutoff is actually not that low. It's $28.85 per hour in BC. In the rest of the provinces and territories, it hovers around mid-20s to high 20s dollars per hour. So that's more than minimum wage. It could be that the position is higher skilled than you think. It could be someone working in accounting as an accounting assistant. It could be someone working even as a supervisor in a restaurant. So it's important to note that low wage does not necessarily equal low skill. So how do these changes affect the general public of Canada or foreign workers wanting to eventually immigrate? Well, there may not be a direct impact. As I mentioned, this is the Employment Department of Canada who processes LMIAs. This doesn't affect work permits. If an LMIA is approved, the foreign worker can apply for a work permit and that will be assessed on its own merits, whether the person is eligible for a work permit and is able to do the job that the LMIA is based on. So in that sense, there is no real direct change to immigration. However, I can say that with these changes and potentially upcoming changes from Service Canada, if it's more difficult to get approved for an LMIA, that means it may be more difficult for a foreign worker to get, say, 50 points in their express entry profile for having an approved LMIA. It may be more difficult for temporary residents to stay after their study permit expires or stay after their post-grad work permit expires. So these can have effects coming up in the future, but we may not see changes immediately, I'll say. If I can make a point about today's video, it's that LMIAs should be considered exceptional. They should be considered a last option, a last resort for Canadian employers trying to fill a position at their company. So it would make sense to have these kinds of restrictions coming. This is actually what it used to be like many years ago, but COVID kind of caused some changes, and when companies came back to work, they needed workers. And in a sense, it became a bit easier for LMIAs to be approved. But now it seems that there's a definite shift towards LMIAs becoming more exceptional, and therefore, whether or not the LMIA can be approved, they may be assessed more strictly. And in some cases, like these low-wage positions, they may not even be processed at all if there's a high unemployment rate. If you have any questions about LMIAs, whether you're a temporary resident in Canada or a Canadian employer, we can answer any questions you have about the process. Thank you for your time.